That's harder than knuckles. Yeah, that's going to be harder than knuckles all day. Okay, so we're going to start this joint meeting, Planning Commission and the Lompoc City Council. It is Tuesday, October 27th, 2015. We have roll call, please.
Planning Commissioner Rodenheim. No. Planning Commissioner Leach. Planning Commissioner Clark.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Sione.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Chair Fink.
Here.
Councilmember Vega.
Here.
Councilmember Starbuck.
Present.
Councilmember Mosby.
Here.
Councilmember Holmdahl.
Here.
Mayor Bob Lingle.
Here. Okay, this is a joint meeting, so it's going to be co-chaired between myself and Planning Commissioner Chair, Mr. Fink. So we're going to start off with oral communications. This is your opportunity to speak to this group for, you have plenty of opportunities today, so let's start off with just 2 minutes right now on any item. Okay. Special for John. Come on up for 3. By the way, we're going to have more than 1 or 2 opportunities to speak, so.
Good evening, Council, Commissioners. John Lynn, Lompoc resident. First, I'm sorry I was not able to meet with the consultants on the days they were in town, but unfortunately I was out of town. I hope for an opportunity to chat with them in the future. Once before, in 2006 and 2007, the Lompoc City Council paid a consultant to write a comprehensive zoning ordinance, update the sign ordinance, but that consultant was not familiar with the community or its needs. The sign ordinance was the first, and after it was prepared, it was presented to the council. The ordinance was so bad, not knocking you guys, that the council closed it out, instructed the city staff to correct the problem. The consultant was fired, and we paid $60,000 to do it. I think the difficulty there was that the council wasn't involved, or the consultant wasn't involved in the community. Next, the council wisely asked a task force through the Chamber of Commerce to draft revisions to the current sign ordinance, which was drafted by the community and the city staff in 1982. The work was completed in late 2007 and presented to the council. As you know, has never been presented for approval to the Planning Commission or the council, and I hope this consultant will look at what the community has done and simply update it for the changes that have evolved since 2007. Rest assured that if another bad sign ordinance comes to this council, the community will oppose it. Councilmember Starbuck and I worked on that sign ordinance task force, and we're certainly available to help at any time. In 2012, a well-conceived general commercial ordinance was created that was conceptually accepted by the community and many of the council members. At that time, the council felt it should be held back until the general plan was approved and the existing zones were used in the general plan. The zoning ordinance could then be developed and the general plan zones amended to match. It was never the intent of the council to retain the existing zones in the general plan. I advocated then for a general commercial zone, and now with an overlay for mixed use to replace PCD, C2, CO, and mixed use, and probably one more I've forgotten since then. Under no circumstances can the label mixed use continue to be used, as it creates too many problems for financing. During my time as mayor, I was consistently confronted with businesses that found a perfect building, but with our numerous zones, they were simply unable to use them, and I had to look for a less perfect building. Some of them were never able to locate here. Many of them we found another location for. The first action of this council should be to amend the Old Town commercial zoning to eliminate the church prohibition. A similar prohibition has just cost another city a multi-million-dollar settlement. And just so you, in case you haven't got a copy, there's the sign ordinance. I would be delighted to deliver a digital copy. Thank you, council.
Okay, thank you, John. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to close oral communication. You know what we should do is give an introduction to our panel over here.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Wise, president of Lisa Wise Consulting. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hi, thank you for having us. I'm Jen Doherty, a senior associate with Lisa Wise Consulting.
Go ahead, sure.
I'm Lucille Breeze, Planning Manager with the City of Lompoc.
Teresa Gallivan, Economic Development Director, Assistant City Manager.
Patrick Weimiller, City Manager.
Okay, okay, so I'm going to move on to new business. Now, it is our goal to make the zoning ordinance accommodate the growth and projections for the 2030 general plan. I think that this is probably where we're going to start. But let's sort of explain what the purpose of this session is. I don't believe we're here to get into the nitty-gritty of the zoning ordinance, but maybe Lucille can give us a little guidance as to what this meeting is about tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We are here this evening, and we're very pleased to be at a point that we were looking forward to for quite some time during our general plan update, to get to the stage where we can implement the decisions that were made during the general plan, and we can revise our ordinance to meet more updated standards, to use terminology that is more current, to have a more user-friendly and a very, very interactive type of ordinance. And so the council allowed us to go out. We did an RFP. We had a number of good applicants who came forward to provide us with a proposal. We did interview those applicants and chose a group that we believe is a local group out of San Luis Obispo. They will do a good job. They understand and have met with members of the community, have a good feel for what the community would like to see in the new ordinance. We will be, and Lisa will go over the proposal and the schedule. We will have a number of workshops focusing in on special sections of the ordinance so that we are going to be able to have in-depth meetings, have members of the community express their opinions, and really work through some of the issues so we understand where the problems are and what can resolve those problems, how we can move forward, and at the end of our time period have a very workable, usable ordinance that the community buys into and is happy with, that all the decision makers buy into. And that's our objective, to have a solid ordinance, because we don't want it to be 40 years before it's updated again, but sometimes those time periods go by very quickly. We're not asking you to make any decisions this evening. What we're asking you to do is, as Ms. Wise goes through the proposal or through the PowerPoint, you will see different sections that we're kind of looking for, that we would like your input. If you in the community have any additional thoughts, as noted, we will have a number of opportunities for discussions during the process. But this is a kickoff, and so any general thoughts that you might want to share with us, we're happy to take. We're here to listen. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Wise, and she will start our program.
Lucille, before, Mr. Fink, do you have any comments or?
Well, yeah, we on the Planning Commission, this is a tough task for us. We won't know what the results of this process is for another 10 or 15 years, and I doubt that any of us that are serving on the Planning Commission now will be here to reap the benefits or the criticisms for what occurs. So we're going to try our best, but we need input from the public. What was it, 40 years ago we did this? Well, see, it was just almost yesterday. So anyway, as we move through this, we're going to be looking for your help. And there'll be 5 additional workshops that'll be very focused, and that's where we want the focused comments so we can develop the discussion and vet out all of this stuff. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Wise?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Members of the Planning Commission, no. We have a presentation. It's about 15 or 20 slides. Just wanted to give you a high-level overview of the scope of work, the process, the timeline, and then give plenty of chance for interaction and discussion. Part of what we were going to do also was talk about the stakeholder interviews we held last month. Just give you an overview of that so you kind of have some idea what we heard during those. I think it was 2 days of back-to-back interviews. We talked to about 25 folks here in the city, so we're going to talk about that a little bit too. And I think we spoke with many of you here on the commission and council. Not everybody, but a lot of you, and in the audience. If we didn't speak with you during those interviews, we're happy to have follow-up interviews and phone calls, so it wasn't the only time people can schedule appointments with us, so we knew it was a narrow block of time, but there'll be more opportunity to provide input. So while we get started with just kind of where we are, so I am Lisa Wise, President of Lisa Wise Consulting. We're based in San Luis Obispo. Our background is planning and finance. We do a lot of planning work all over the state, and we do a lot of financial work. Before going into planning, I worked in finance in Chicago and New York for about 10 years. So I think besides the sound planning background we have, the financial aspect brings a lot to the table also. We worked on dozens of codes around the state and around the country, so I think we bring a lot of experience to the city, and we hope that comes out sort of in the next couple of years. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the agenda and keep talking through the presentation as we get that loaded up so we don't lose too much time. So in the presentation, we wanted to talk about the approach and schedule, some of the key milestones over the next couple of years. It is a 2-year program, so we have a timeline to show you that. We have a couple slides to go through the stakeholder interview summary, and then we have 5 slides that are kind of discussion topics for to tee off a conversation with the commission, the council, and the public. As Lucille said, there was a general plan adopted in 2014, the 2030 general plan. It was a big effort for the city, and probably all or most of you participated in that, so we are definitely building off of that effort. As you know, the general plan lays out the blueprint for the city, and there's a lot of overarching policies and programs that we're looking at in the general plan, and a lot of implementation measures that we're already going through and analyzing. Measures that talk about the H Street corridor, uses along there, and infill winery-related facilities. That's identified in the general plan. Policies and regulations related to landscaping, lighting, density bonuses for senior housing, hillside development, although I realize we're mostly flat, but there are some hillside development regulations in there too. So that's just an indication that we are combing through all of that to make sure that as we update the zoning ordinance that we understand what the policy's already been set in the general plan, building off of that. As somebody said, the zoning ordinance was last adopted comprehensively in 1974. So it's over 40 years old. Honestly, it's one of the oldest zoning ordinances we've worked with over our 15-year history doing this. So I would characterize this as a comprehensive update to your zoning ordinance, not that we'll throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, but it is a comprehensive update to what you have, I think, now. So we'll go through the general plan and develop a matrix that illustrates how we roll that forward. One of the big components of the update, though, will also be looking at federal and state law, making sure that we're in compliance with federal and state regulations. So one of our tasks will be develop a matrix to show you recent legislation, maybe not going back to the last 40 years, but recent legislation and what we need to do to bring the city up in compliance with federal and state regulations. You didn't really need to see the slides anyway, it's just...
There we go.
So let me get caught up with myself here. So that was the agenda. I talked kind of about what we're going to cover. Talked about the team. Jen Dougherty is a senior associate with our office. She's working on the project with us, and also Catherine Slama will be working with us. It's a big effort, so we need to make sure we have a qualified team working with you. We also have a Rincon consultant as part of the team doing the CEQA analysis, and they'll be doing that starting next year. So we talked a little bit about the general plan. I don't need to backtrack there too much. And then the zoning ordinance, just the date of the zoning ordinance, the fact that this is a comprehensive update of that. We will go back and look at federal and state legislation to make sure we're in compliance with state and federal law. Lots happened recently, so we do an analysis of that. So we just want to talk a little bit about some of the sections of the zoning ordinance. So it's Title 17 in your municipal code, your current zoning ordinance. It's really only 3 divisions, and the last division is kind of a catch-all division right now. So when we go through this process, we sort of we do an analytic analysis or diagnostic analysis of your current regulations and how they're set up. And we come back with a proposal of how to organize your regulations so that they're easier to navigate, more user-friendly, better cross-references, all of those things. So we'll develop a detailed table of contents and show you where the existing regulations sort of fit into that and where we develop new sections. And that's part of what we do as an annotated outline early on. We'll also spend a lot of time putting more things into tables and developing more graphics and illustrations so that your standards are illustrated. Everything's not just in text. We'll have a lot more illustrations and graphics for you to use. This slide really highlights some of the major components of the zoning ordinance, looking at the zoning districts. I think Division 2 has all your zoning districts kind of lined out. We'll go through those and roll those forward. We'll do an update of your allowable land uses. A lot of those are really, really out of date, and also make sure they're all defined well. That was brought up in your general plan too, to really go back and revisit all that. In addition, we'll look at all the development standards. Some of your standards are probably working okay, but we'll go back and revisit those and adjust those as necessary. And then another important section is standards for specific uses, telecommunications, bed and breakfast, those kind of things will be rolled forward. And then we spend a lot of time on procedures and administration. What permits do you need? What's the process for that? Where does the public chime in? What is the appeal process? What is the noticing? So we'll spend a lot of time working with you and the public on making sure that those reflect city intentions. Again, we'll build off your existing regulations and modify and improve those as needed. And you'll see that in what we do. We do a tracking matrix and we kind of document what's new, what's not new, and what's been modified, so you can kind of see how things have rolled forward. I want to talk a little bit about the approach and schedule, and then after this is the stakeholder interviews, and I didn't know where you want to take a break, but it's at the discretion, of course, of the mayor.
Okay, so just so everyone knows,
Yeah.
after this portion, before we get into the stakeholders, we'll take some public comment after this session.
So pay attention out there.
So the next slide just goes through some major milestones of the process. So of course in September we conducted stakeholder interviews. We're going to go through those findings in a minute. These other sections are some of the major deliverables coming up. So we'll do what's called a code diagnostic analysis. I talked about that a little bit. That's really where we go through existing regulations, identify what's working, what's not working. They're very old, so we need to do a lot of work there. We'll also do a general plan consistency analysis and a legal analysis as part of that step. And then we come up with the recommendations memo, which really outlines the next steps. It's an annotated table of contents, a style guide, if we need to develop new regulations, sort of some recommendations of what those could look like. So there's a preview of newer sections, and you would see that in the recommendations memo. Also, it was our understanding, and I think that's part of the discussion for this evening, is that the city wanted to move the sign code forward ahead of some of the other regulations. So that's in our timeline to move that forward and get that adopted in 2016 as an option. After we do the initial analysis of the diagnostics and the recommendations, we draft the code. There's an administrative draft code, a public review draft, which we bring back to you to review. And then there's public outreach throughout the entire process, which I'll go through as we go through the timeline. I just have 2 more slides on the timeline, and then we can open it up for more discussion. So this is the schedule. This is broken up into 2 slides because it's a 2-year process. What I wanted to point at first is that the sign ordinance is going to move ahead of everything else. That's that bottom line there. So we'll start that at the end of the year. There is a workshop designated just to the sign ordinance early on, and then we'll move through admin draft, public review draft, and then hearings in the late summer of next year, 2016. So that's a discussion item tonight for the commission and council, but that was the direction we got when we did the proposal. Moving up a little bit higher than on the schedule, there are, in addition to the workshop on the sign ordinance, there's 4 other workshops proposed for 2016 into early 2017 as we draft the code. Those are looking at, this is up for discussion, but what we propose to look at are signs in one of the workshops, admin and procedures in one of the workshops, and then really all the other pieces at the code in the other workshops. So landscaping, parking, standards for specific uses, anything else that doesn't really fall into the zones or the procedures, we would catch it up in that other workshop. And then the final workshop would look at the public review draft. Once that's out, we can have a workshop kind of going through how it all came together. Just moving down the lines, I talked about the code diagnostic and analysis we do early on. That W there is the workshop we're having this evening, and then coming out of that, we'll do a recommendations memo that will be made public and brought forward to the first workshop. The second slide sort of overlaps with these dates, but what I wanted to show is just point out a couple of things. So that community engagement we just talked about, we'll be drafting the admin ordinance through spring and summer of next year, and then bring the public review draft, work through this, staff at the review draft at the end of the year, December, January, and then bring a public review draft out early 2017. So most of next year we'll be working on the signed ordinance, having workshops, and developing an admin draft document with staff. And then 2017 is when it comes out. They'll be back and forth on the public review draft. We have another workshop or study session with Commission and Council spring of 2017, and then go into hearings late summer, early fall of 2017. So it's about a 2-year process overall. Again, that's something that we wanted to discuss tonight, but that's the proposal sort of as a starting point. And I think with that, those are most of the points I wanted to cover, just to kind of kick things off and give an overview of the major deliverables and timeline. Our next item were the stakeholder interview summary. So, thank you.
Okay, so let's take a few minutes. Anyone from the council or planning commission, any questions, comments, concerns?
I have something here, Bob.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Wise, I noticed you said the sign ordinance is going to take precedence pretty much in the development stages. Now, I think my concern would be, since this is a 2-year process, how to get the biggest bang for our buck development-wise, job creation-wise, filling vacant spaces right now, or are we kind of going to be held in limbo for 2 more years as we move forward, okay? My background's in real estate, so I'm a little bit more concerned with filling our vacant spaces, allowing more expandable and more versatile uses of our existing spaces to fill it so that we can have a healthy report card so that we can move forward and attract other people that would want to bring jobs and development into the city. So anyway, that's one of my questions, okay? Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Anyone on the council, planning commission, you kind of got to raise your hand because I can't see your lights, so. Come on. Okay, anyone from the public, any comments about what you've seen so far, the schedule? Just step forward to the table here with the microphone.
Mr. Mayor, Planning Commissioners, Steve Pepe, Economic Development Committee, I would question the priority of spending a lot of time on the sign ordinance. The sign ordinance, while important and while an irritant to many people, is not going to have any significant impact on economic development. We've got a real issue with the wine ghetto and the fact that you can't have food service there. If you moved on that and had food service, that would then bring in sales tax revenue and hopefully other revenue. And it just seems to me, if you were a business person looking at this, you would spend your initial time on those areas that are going to enhance the revenues of the city and help economic development first. And the sign ordinance, it's got a long and tortured history, and whether you do it in 16 or 17 isn't going to make much difference. So I would urge that you reevaluate that priority. Thank you.
Next, anyone?
Mr. Mayor, Member of Planning Commission, I think it's a wonderful thing that you have done.
Mr. Sabani, just introduce yourself as well.
I'm sorry, what did I do?
No, you introduce yourself, your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Morris Sobhani, 1515 East Chestnut Avenue. 14 years ago, when we started the first winery in Lompoc, it took us almost 3-4 months for city people and us. We didn't know what we were doing. We were hesitant to allow this industry to come to Lompoc. As you know, city of Lompoc has been very anxious to bring industry to this city. They've spent lots of money, different locations, for bringing industry. But this wine industry has come as a gift to the city of Lompoc. To me, it behooves us to nurture and nourish this industry. And I agree with this Mr. Pepe, who said this sign ordinance is essential and needed, but priority-wise, I feel we should start this wine overlay ordinance. As you know, we have been operating on industrial commercial zone. As such, we are limited in operating properly. City of Solvang, Buellton, Los Olivos, they were comparing to us nothing. Now they're getting ahead of us. So to me, we should find a way. We cannot afford, we have been waiting for 14 years. We cannot afford another 2 years. It behooves us to concentrate, to find a way and means to see if you could expedite this overlay ordinance. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Jenny Moretti, President of the Board of the Lompoc Wine Alliance, the Association of Urban Wineries within the Lompoc zip code, Lompoc city limits, that is, 26 wineries, owner of Moretti Wines and owner of Taste of Santa Rita Hills. I'm here to echo what Steve Pepe and Morris Sobhani has said. We're here because we just want attention to expedite the needs of the wine industry. In the city, you have very few industries that bring in the kind of tourism revenue and benefit other service industries like hotels, like restaurants, like gas stations. We have very few thriving industries in Lompoc, and this is one that's growing and it will continue to grow. If we have a zoning overlay or a change in the ordinance where we can have food in the wine ghetto, it would increase business in a huge way, and we would be able to compete with the other wine zones in this county that we're falling behind on now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Kate Griffith, also on the Lompoc Wine Alliance board and also co-owner of Flying Goat Cellars. Just want to reiterate my support of fast-tracking this review of industrial uses and more inclusive uses of zoning in the industrial area that we know as the Lompoc Wine Ghetto that can then be used as perhaps a precedent for other areas in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Councilmember, Planning Commissioners, Ken Austini, Lompoc Valley Chamber of Commerce and Industries Bureau. And I really just want to echo what's already been said. The importance of getting food into the wine ghetto area can be a huge benefit to our community. And again, that's something that needs to be moved up on the list and hopefully happen very soon. We have a gold mine down there that is just waiting to explode, and food's going to help make that happen. So I encourage you to move that up on the list and try and get something done with that in 2016. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else?
Mayor, council members, planning commissioners, Tom Davidson. I am on the Economic Development Committee here, but I'm here on behalf of my day job. I'm a commercial real estate broker, and as such, am trying to find businesses to bring to town, trying to fill spaces and so forth. And to reiterate what all of these people have said, if there's one thing you could move up that would instantly bring some new businesses to town and help a number of those existing businesses, would be to allow food in the industrial zones. And not just necessarily the wine ghetto. I think there's some other areas that ought to have that under consideration as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to close public comment, bring it back to the commission and the council.
Yeah, now this is going to be a decision that council's going to have to make, because there can only be one number one priority, and y'all are going to have to pick what that is, what we go to work on first. There may be other ways to accomplish what the folks in the wine ghetto want to do without amending the zoning ordinance. There are other remedies available to us. However, I sympathize with the economic development potential for the wine ghetto. So signs won't necessarily improve the economy, but other things may. So I guess at this point, the Planning Commission would be looking for direction from the City Council as to which of these things you want to be a priority, and then we'll proceed.
Mr. Weinmiller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of comments, first of all, and there's a good portion of me that agrees with the comments that have been made in terms of priority. I will say my understanding is up till now the direction from the council has been to do a priority work with the signs, because we do have a number. It's probably as widespread of an impact as anything. I realize there are other things that probably have more critical consequences to them, but we certainly have both, current businesses that are either non-conforming and want to be conforming, or at least have this vetted out on the sign side of things. So I just wanted to give that background in case there is some shuffling of priorities that was done. I would say also that this issue particularly, staff has met with the folks representing the local winery industry over particularly this issue about the potential of at least having a temporary solution to being able to have food service going on in the ghetto area. And we're committed to coming forward with some solutions, again, at least some temporary solutions that we can offer up. And we will be doing that fast track in parallel to whatever's going on overall with our zoning ordinance review. It's a matter of, to me, really when the permanent aspects of that are considered, but as to the getting something into place, we're committed to bringing that forward as quickly as possible. So just wanted to make sure we knew about that because just where we have a priority on the sign ordinance and the timelines you were given, I don't think delays us coming up with some initial short-term, at least, solutions to the issues being raised. Thanks.
Anyone down here?
You go first. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm really excited to see the wine industry here today working together, because when we started back in 1998, there was only one winery, and it grew and it grew and it got to where we're at right now. And in the last one of the elections, I got defeated in. Everybody said, all you worry about is the wine industry, so why don't you talk about something else? I said, the wine industry brought people to town, they brought business to town, and people have looked the thing over. I'm really pleased to see the wine industry itself now working together, trying to bring it in. And I agree with what you're talking about, but I'm really happy to see what the cross-section of the general public is now, is that the number of wineries. When I talked to Richard Longoria originally, I said, when are you going to put a tasting room in? Because he had it in Los Olivos. He says, nobody comes to town to have a tasting room for him. And he finally came in a few years later, but it worked out and it's good. And they know it, and everything. But about 80% of the people going into the ghetto come from Orange County. They like it. It's well known. My son lives down there, and they know all of Lompoc wines and such. So I think that is how we can stress it. But having it something else in there, we talked about it before, but nothing gets done. So I think this time we have to get it done some way to have food industry work down there with an overlay, whatever this comes up with. But it's got to work for everybody.
Councilmember Vega.
Yeah, I agree with these comments in general of making something happen now. Being in business in Lompoc is not exactly really easy, okay? So these people here that have to come in here and you have to pay your rent, your money, your workman's comp, your Board of Equalization every month, it's a hardship without having some help here. I believe that being conforming is great, but we need to take the bull by the horns and turn the city into something we want now, okay? We can always follow the rule book, but I think that on behalf of the business community and economic vitality, we need to make what's going to have a general impact on our businesses and the owners of our commercial buildings. We need to do it and put them as a priority. That's my comment.
Councilmember Starbuck.
How come it's an industrial park? It's not set up. There's no drainage for food, so it's obviously going to be food that's brought in. Why can't we go down the path of just doing CUPs for a food truck, the same way that we have wine tasting rooms in an industrial area?
Okay, that could, Ms. Breeze.
Well, as Mr. Weimiller indicated, we had discussed with the representatives of the Wine Alliance and Mr. Sabani the possibility of taking a temporary use permit to the Planning Commission to allow, as you noted, to allow food trucks on a rotation basis in the wine ghetto to make sure that it is something that would work, and it would be kind of a preliminary timeline for them to see how well they were received, and we would have the opportunity then to finalize some of the arrangements that need to be done, because when we look at the overlay zone, we are going to have some in-depth discussions. It's going to take a little bit longer to meet with all the winemakers to make sure that we get it right, that we get what they need in the ordinance. So that's why we were proposing to do it a little bit later. But if we were able to come up with this idea of a temporary use permit for the food trucks through the Planning Commission, we believe that would be a temporary fix and give them what they need almost immediately and not have to wait even a few months through the ordinance process.
Okay. I'm seeing shakings of the head from the wine industry that you're not excited about the food trucks only. Is that what I'm shaking the heads? Is that okay? Okay.
Exactly. That's the worst idea.
Okay. Okay. Wait. Okay. I just trying to read some body language there. Okay. Okay. So we'll need further discussion on that. Councilmember Mosby.
Your conversation about doing a wine overlay or a food overlay or whatever you want to do in the industrial park. I remember reading an article back in 1978 when that industrial park was developed over there, and the excitement in the community because it was Lompoc's first industrial park and how many jobs it was going to be in and what was going to happen. Now, we have seen a significant movement, and I know Mr. Sabani had a few difficulties filling some of his larger units, and things have kind of flexed and fluxed and moved through on this. But I think we're getting a little distracted with what we're trying to accomplish here. And we're thinking about focusing on a smaller portion of the community. When we're talking sign ordinance, we're talking about the whole community. We're talking about doing something that's for the people of the whole community, where the ghetto is more specific. And I think it's very important watching a number of businesses who we actually had difficulty with signage. It wasn't too long ago we lost a key restaurant because there was an argument over how big it was, too many colors, it wasn't this, it wasn't that. And I've seen guys have to paint their houses to match their sign because their sign was the wrong color because it didn't match the house. So they painted their house because their sign was pink and black and white. And And there's been these complications with this sign ordinance. So I think instead of focusing on something that's, granted it's important, I'm not just, everything we're doing here is important, but the sign is the community as a whole. It's been something that's been knocking on the door for quite a few years to get done. And I think it's very important that we move this and get this through. That was when we brought it, as I think it was Councilmember Starbuck brought it up front, when we're moving this and progressing forward, that we make sure that we keep sign ordinance on the tip of our tongue. And that's why it's on the tip of our tongue. It wasn't that we just randomly pulled it out of the hat. Even it's for the community of the whole. There's a lot of people that it affects, not one small portion of the community, granted an important portion of the community, but the community as a whole.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Wise, Ms. Breeze, so obviously this is something we have to get resolved. Is this something we need to make a decision tonight at the council? Probably so for the timeline, right? Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, in terms of the timeline, if there's things we want to move up ahead, it would be better if we have a conversation tonight about it so we understand our marching orders, so to speak. You know, if we can't come to a decision tonight, we can come back with some options at another meeting not too far down the road in terms of how we would deal with this, from a temporary use permit to an overlay to, you know, conditional use permit to other kind of ideas. And it's, you know, we could maybe move two things forward at one time. The sign ordinance and the conditional overlay or something with the wine ghetto, but we just need to look at the timeline and what that would mean for everybody.
Councilmember Vega.
Ms. Wise, by mixing and matching a couple of your priorities, okay, say it was the sign ordinance and maybe it was temporary permits and CUP and whatever to encourage economic development and help a few people out, how does that work on your timeline? You guys obviously have this mapped out within your 2-year time frame, okay? I'm not sure exactly how much time was dedicated to just the sign ordinance and you know.
Yeah, so we had about 7 or 8 months dedicated to the sign ordinance, and part of that is just so we have times for, you know, a workshop, hearings. We'd have to do some CEQA reviews, so there's noticing for that. And if we move things forward piecemeal and we adopt them one at a time, we have to have a CEQA process that goes with that, so that would need to be taken into account. That's not very extensive, so I don't want to overstate that, but that would be something to think about. We'd have separate workshops probably for different items, you know, that maybe wouldn't dovetail. I think we could set it up if we you know, had a program and a table of contents for the whole comprehensive update, and we know how these things slot in. Not the most efficient way to do it, but I know you guys have been waiting a long time, 40 years for this, and now everybody's like ready to go, and a lot of things are sort of bubbling up to the top at one time. So it's possible to kind of hit the most important items for the city first. We just need to think about how that would fit together schedule-wise.
One more question for you, ma'am, if that's okay. You guys have extensive experience in putting together zoning updates and zoning conformity, so how often does the sign ordinance take precedence in your experience? Okay, I know each city is different, but you know what, like kind of, is it always #1 priority?
Signs are always a big issue, but they don't always come ahead of the rest of the code generally. But they're always a big issue, but it's signs and parking.
Gotcha. So, okay.
Okay, so what I want to do is, we're going to proceed for now, but before we're done this evening, if you look at the agenda on the cover of your sheets, there's an area here, the steps 4 and 5, discussion and next steps. So I want the council to be thinking about this issue, and maybe Ms. Wise, you guys can be looking at, and Lucille may be looking at what options we have, because I think we need to probably make a decision tonight where we're going to go forward. And I had my calculator out a little while ago, so I did the math, and I see there's 2 people speaking in favor of the sign ordinance, 2 people speaking in favor of the wine ghetto, and that kind of makes me this goat out there in the middle of the field that's going to have to make a decision. So I need some input, okay?
Okay.
So thank you. Okay, so let's move on now. Any other comments from you before we move on? Okay. So we're going to move on to stakeholder interviews and summary.
Thank you, Mayor. As Lisa mentioned, the purpose of stakeholder interviews is for us to be able to collect community knowledge on zoning-related issues and opportunities. And while the city staff set up and scheduled those stakeholder interviews, Lisa Weiss Consulting, we conducted those interviews over a 2-day period in late September. And during that process, we interviewed about 25 stakeholders. And those interviews typically consist of open-ended questions, and so those included questions such as what aspects of the existing zoning ordinance are working and why, and what aspects need to be improved and why. And those interviews were confidential to help elicit kind of an honest feedback to help really inform our work. Those interviews lasted about 30 to 40 minutes each. And I'll provide a quick summary of the key issues that were raised. There was a summary memo included in your packet, but I'll just hit the key points. The first topic related to permitting. And what we heard from stakeholders was that it's not always clear when a permit is required. And then when a permit is required, it's then not always clear which permit or permits are required. We also heard that it seemed that conditional use permits were sometimes seemingly to be required unnecessarily, and that although the permit process has been improved over the past 5 or so years, that continuing to streamline that process is important to our stakeholders. For the wine ghetto, this has been brought up already tonight. We heard general support of allowing food service in the wine ghetto, and we heard comments between mobile food vendors to actual brick and mortar restaurants. And so I think having that discussion will be important as we move through the zoning ordinance. We also heard that addressing parking for limos and buses is going to be important, as well as considering the long-term needs and industrial uses for the industrial zone, not just specific to wineries. For Old Town, we heard that there is a need to have more flexibility in terms of the allowed uses in that area. And we also heard that this is an area that's really in need of revitalization. So drafting development standards and regulations that really support and encourage development in that area really are critical. And then we also heard that it is important to be able to look at incorporating, which I think you've mostly done, incorporating the Old Town standards into the zoning ordinance and having those guidelines called out as well, maybe to eliminate having to look into places for regulations. In terms of the commercial zones, stakeholders discussed the possibility of combining some of the commercial zones. So I think that's something that would require some more discussion for us to be able to get some direction on that. And similarly to Old Town, we heard comments about modernizing the uses that are allowed, being more flexible in terms of those uses, as well as providing sufficient flexibility in the development standards to really foster growth and encourage revitalization in the commercial areas. We heard mixed comments really about the mixed-use zone. We heard comments that were supportive in terms of it providing improved walkability, in terms of it providing additional opportunities for new businesses to find locations to operate out of, and also providing really kind of some core areas that provide kind of a vibrancy to commercial areas in terms of walkability and things of that nature. In terms of criticisms of the mixed-use zone, we really heard that that seemed to revolve around parking and parking-related issues. And then in terms of mixed-use development, this is specifically speaking of a single building that may have, say, retail below, residential above. We heard that there should be flexibility in the code to allow that type of development, but that it should be flexible enough to allow it when the market conditions support that type of development. Signs we've talked about a little bit tonight too. In terms of signs, what we heard from stakeholders was that signs really need to be, well, firstly, I think we heard that the existing sign regulations that restrict colors and also restrict corporate logos appear to be really overly restrictive, and that we should look to allow regulations that allow signs to be legible and signs that are proportionate to the buildings on which they're located. We also heard that clear regulations for temporary signs are important, and that they should be explicit enough to allow for consistent enforcement of those regulations. For airport uses, we also heard that there should be some flexibility in terms of the allowable uses. We heard that providing an additional option in terms of businesses to locate maybe adjacent to the airport, as long as those businesses are compatible with airport operations, is important. And in this case, an example that was provided was that you could repair plane radios adjacent to the airport, but you couldn't repair car radios. So perhaps there's some opportunities there. For housing, a number of stakeholders commented that there's a need for executive level upscale housing in Lompoc, and that the existing housing stock in terms of type, age, and size are really an obstacle in terms of attracting that executive level resident to Lompoc. Performance standards are regulations that minimize negative impacts of land use operations. And so in this case, we heard that there's a desire to have these types of regulations, perhaps related to odor, noise, or vibration, primarily to protect residential uses. And then lastly, in terms of parking, the comments generally were that parking shouldn't be overly burdensome, the rates shouldn't be too high, but that the parking requirements should be adequate so that we're not seeing any type of spillover or negative impacts on adjacent uses. So that summarizes the stakeholder interview feedback.
Okay. Mr. Fink, do you have anything you want to add right now?
Oh, yeah, concerning the airport, Lucille, when was the last time that the airport master plan or development plan was updated?
The Lompoc Airport master plan for the FAA, there were funds provided in 2011. That plan was an FAA plan. It was not a city plan because there was no CEQA done on it, so it was never adopted by the city. The previous plan was from 1998, and that is the actual plan that shows the layout plan, and that is something that we do need to work on actually having that updated, because it doesn't include the new property to the south along Aviation. So there are some areas that need to be revised.
So as far as economic development goes, that would be a vital piece of information to have as to what is the plan for the airport, right?
Yes, and that's part of the airport master plan process, is to identify the uses that would be allowable there. There is an overlay for the airport, and even in our ARC review guidelines, we do have a place in there for discussion, but that's never been updated yet. So the intention for us is to move forward with as many of the development standards as we can.
Okay, and would that be part of this process, or is that another process?
The LAMP is a part of another process. That's not part of the actual zoning ordinance update. However, in the zoning ordinance, because we do have an area that identifies uses in that overlay zone, we will be doing some work with the Airport Commission on our zoning ordinance.
Good, thank you.
Anything from members of the council or planning commission?
I just want to make a quick comment, I guess more as a private citizen of Lompoc, and it's about the issue of parking. I feel that there's always this overarching preoccupation in pretty much all the decisions we make about parking, and it was mentioned as one of the topics in the interviews, and also in relation to the wine ghetto area. I have a feeling that even though it's a very important issue, we sometimes give it too much consideration when it comes to again, attracting new businesses and facilitating economic growth. Obviously, a business comes in and providing parking is a large expense. It's probably a large part of their budget. We should try and make it a little easier. I think that making it or preventing us from having growth and development opportunities because of parking is a very silly reason to, again, put hurdles in this process. Lompoc is a city with almost non-existent traffic, at least compared to most of other places I've lived in. And maybe we should try and make sure through, again, zoning and intelligent placing of areas into residential areas, into commercial areas, into any areas. Maybe we should try to make sure that people walk more rather than drive all the time. And maybe that will kind of compensate the fact that we are a little bit more lenient on the parking issues.
Okay. Anyone else from the table around here? Councilmember Mosby.
Ms. Breeze, how many mixed-use projects have been built out, say, in the last 10, 20 years?
We have a few that we've approved. We've really not had any that were built out that are really mixed-use projects.
Mr. Weinmiller.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of comments. One, raising on this mixed-use issue, I think it is something we're going to have to make sure we focus maybe a little more than we do on some of the other areas, only because I guess what I'm hearing is the outcome of the inputs that we were getting was, as reported, a mixed understanding. And certainly, I've got a little confusion myself. I'd worked in 2 other cities before working here. In those 2 cities, the mixed use was the holy grail of planning and revitalization, particularly in Old Town and downtown areas. And I've heard not only tonight from Mr. Lynn, but I've heard statements from him before and from others that, oh no, that's it's like a deal killer. It's impossible to get financing for projects on mixed-use zoning. And I don't know what the answers, the right reality is, but I know that's, when we're that far apart on our, the range of potential of understanding and potential outcomes, that's something we're going to have to resolve. The other sort of takeaway thought I had on parking, I think it's interesting that as we look at that, we're probably going to have to get pretty surgical about parking, because I think in some cases, as I've looked at our parking requirements, they seem to be spot on. For instance, if someone's building a hotel and you require 1 parking spot per room plus a small amount for the staff, that makes sense to me. On the other hand, as I drive up and down H and see some of the larger commercial centers, there are fields of empty parking stalls there. We're doing something where our formulation requires a massive land use that doesn't have the commercial activity to come behind and support it, and at a time where we're getting pretty tight on available commercial space. So that's an area particularly where I'd say we have some other formula outcome that has to be there where we can turn some of those parking areas, some of the parking allocated space into storefront square footage and still be supported by existing parking areas. So just wanted to say, I think there's something surgical that needs to go on there. It's not going to be an across-the-board answer.
Yeah, I agree. And then I think probably one of the most egregious examples of that several years ago when we did the Pally Winery out on Central. huge amount of parking space for about 3 employees out there, so. Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
It's definitely a concern when they came before the council on that project. But on the plus side for them, and I haven't heard them say anything yet, they had more place to turn their trucks around and park their cars and use it in the times of the year. So, I mean, there is times when you have parking out there. Also, they're complaining about parking at one of the lumber yards. Well, there's nothing saying they can't put lumber on a parking space. And if they need that parking, they can use it for something else. So you got to be careful where you say, but I can say, yes, some of the places are more parking than is needed.
Okay. Teresa.
Also, I'd just like to add that in some of those areas, there is the option for future development or future pads to go into those now what seems to be an overparked area. So in some strip centers, that is the opportunity that still is out there in those spaces.
I have some, Bob, if I can.
Yes.
Ms. Wise, I have a question for you here, okay? The first block that we had here, we're permitting wine ghetto, Old Town commercial zones, mixed zone use, or mixed use there. I agree with most of that as a more of a priority, but with parking added, you know, because of economic development and economic vitality, you know, to focus on one thing, the wine ghetto is very important. I think we could probably accomplish that with our permitting process and doing other things instead of just pointing them out. You know, I just think that the quality of life that we're trying to raise here in Lompoc is probably not going to be raised to the point that we'd like if we allow portable food trucks and things like that. You know, it'd be nice to have another set of rules to allow something more permanent where it goes more upscale to what they're trying to do to make sure that Lompoc does raise the quality of life so that we can have people that will come in and rent our rooms and come to our other restaurants, and we can actually build a destination here instead of smoking them, you know what I mean, so to speak, and we're just kind of a pass-through, or we're going to be an overflow from somewhere else. So, my comment.
Anyone else at this table? No? Did you have something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, got some observations on mixed use. I've been on the Planning Commission for 14 years or so, and we've had one mixed-use project come forward. It was Chestnut Landing at Chestnut and H. Some of you may remember that project. It was never developed because it didn't pencil out. But we have to look back at our history of the town. You go down on South H, and there's 2 or 3 buildings down there that were built as mixed-use buildings. They can't be used for that now because there's no ADA access and they don't meet code and all this other stuff. So we can advocate for mixed use because the old timers did it and it seemed to work for them. But we have to take the economics of building buildings into reality these days. In order to reutilize those mixed-use buildings that currently exist would cost a bundle of money. There may be someone in here that's familiar with the construction industry. In order to repurpose those buildings and use them as they were originally intended was cost hundreds of thousands of dollars because you'd have to update them to their current codes, install elevators, and do other things that are A, space consuming, and B, costly. The other projects the one project that was brought was a wonderful project. I mean, when we looked at that, we were all excited. Oh boy, this is going to be an anchor for the downtown and it's really going to go. And then all of a sudden it didn't go anymore. And now there's a brewery plan to go in there, which may or may not go. It depends on the economics of the situation. But mixed use, I don't know. It doesn't seem to catch on here in Lompoc for some reason or other, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because the developers don't see money involved in it. I don't know if it's because of the economic situation that's going on or whatever. I don't think we should just throw it away. I think we should leave the option open for developers to do that if they wish to do it. But we shouldn't require it to be done anywhere in particular. In other words, maybe we could be more inclusive in the commercial zones to include that option as one of the options that are available to people to build if they choose to. And that's pretty much what I got to say about mixed use.
Go ahead.
Ms. Wise, I have one other comment here. Along with permitting and zoning updates, you guys are the consultant that are going to be just recommending or implementing this thing. A part of that is going to be our process that we already have in place. I think, I'm not sure if you're a part of this, but the planning department here, and we have our planning commission. Traditionally, it's taken a long time to get anything through Lompoc. It's a slow process. You could die waiting for something to happen, okay? Really, I mean really. So we need to hopefully streamline something here, so when we have people that come through here, it's clearly defined what the guidelines and process. I'm not sure, and I'm not throwing any stones. What I'm saying is it would be nice to have a clear, concise process instead of the individuals having a hold on how long it takes to get through something.
Right. So one of the things we'll do is look at the procedures, permits and procedures, and see how long it takes, and see where we can streamline or where the city's willing to streamline. Sometimes we even implement a minor use permit, which is a permit approved at the staff level for certain size projects. So we can go through that process, come up with recommendations, and see how we can expedite it where the city is willing to. So we'll work through all that as we kind of go through the permits and procedures in the next few months.
Okay, we're going to go back to the public real quick. This is where I really want some information that we can help Ms. Wise give us some information as to what you want to happen with the food industry in the ghetto, or anything else you want to talk about. Try to be, you'll have 3 minutes, but try to be as concise and specific as you can.
John Lynn. Okay, with regard to the wine ghetto, the core issue there with putting restaurants in is there's a 6-inch sewer line that serves the whole area. So there would not be the possibility, and it also serves the hospital, there would not be the possibility of putting restaurants in without changing that sewer line. The city administrator and I worked with the developers of other properties there to try to incorporate that into it, and there's some things moving there that may allow that. But in the meantime, a real quick, simple fix would be to allow some food truck permitting and also allow the wineries to serve prepackaged foods. So it's not prepared on site, it comes in prepackaged and they can serve it, so it isn't going to be a sewer line problem, and that could be just a really quick administrative change. I disagree with Councilmember Vega with one thing, which is that we now have what I consider to be an extremely fast process, and as an example, the Chrysler dealership went through the process in 74 days. And I could talk about some others that went through. Where we do have a problem, and I think that's what he's thinking of, is the conditional use permit process and the minor use permit process. We did put the zoning administrator process in place, which has helped that, but I think there's some room for improvement there. The principal issue with the downtown mixed use zone, and by the way, it's not the concept of mixed use. Ron was spot on all his comments. It's the word mixed use as the ordinance name. The concept is great. The issue in downtown that could resolve that and make all of those properties usable immediately would be eliminate the requirement for a parking space. We have city parking lots there, but we have never chosen to allow those properties to use that. I just sat with somebody 2 weeks ago and talked about a property down there and rehabbing the upstairs, and the parking was the stumbling block. So that would be a real simple fix there. The current mixed-use ordinance isn't compatible with what's in the general plan, and particularly with regard to parking. And one of the reasons that it hasn't worked very well here is we don't have high land value yet. So in terms of taking small parcels within the mixed-use zone and redeveloping, and there's just no economic drive for that. And the mixed-use zone ordinance that was adopted is extremely restrictive. If you want it to fly, make it easy. So that could be resolved, and I believe it would be successful. Lucille's talked me into mixed use to a certain extent. We need to have that mixed use overlay extend over every commercial zone in the city so that if someone wants to do it and that pencils out, they can do it. And I think the city administrator was spot on parking. We've cured it for the wine industry and the industrial zones. We don't have it solved yet for the large shopping centers. We're probably a little short on the other side on medical centers because we see the overcrowding in those properties. So it needs to be a surgical approach on a category by category basis. And I think I got it all in. Oh, and by the way, Solvang Brew is under construction. They have a demolition permit and they're rocking on. and they should have their building permit perhaps as early as next week. They're going through some legal documents that need to be done, and city administrator's been bird dogging that, so good things.
Thank you. Next.
I take exception to what Mr. Lynn said about the sewer line. I constructed that industrial park, and we have 6-inch lateral line connecting Industrial Way and what do you call Chestnut Court. However, the main line that's on the south side of our property is 8-inch main. That 8-inch main has capacity for quite a bit of sewer line. Another thing is here, everyone says we're going to start a restaurant. We are not going to, at least my understanding is here, nobody is planning to put the restaurants up there. We are trying to provide limited cooking facility at these tasting rooms, a sandwich or deli, something like that. I don't understand who has proposed a white tablecloth restaurant to compete with all the restaurants in town. I think innuendo is here that we are competing with a restaurant in town. That is erroneous. We are trying to provide the minimum sustenance for people who are traveling long distances here. If they want to go to a restaurant, they go to Solvang, to Santa Maria, to Lompoc downtown. They always welcome to go. They stay in the hotels and so forth. So please be clear. And then also, I respect you. You hit the nail on the head. Having a what they call food truck to come up there sound like a fairground. We are not trying to make a fairground. We are trying to elevate this wine ghetto. So by bringing food trucks, are you going to bring a pizza truck? Are you going to bring a taco truck? What is that? We are not planning to do anything like that. Be dignified.
Sir, could you state your name for the record, please? Sir.
I'm sorry?
Mr. Spani, just state your name again one more time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. My name is Morris Sobhani, 1515 East Chestnut.
Thank you. Next, please.
Steve Arrowwood. I'm a winery owner in Lompoc. And so, you know, the wine industry and the zoning and the rules associated with it.
Excuse me once. John, take your conversation outside, please.
The wine industry and the zoning around all the buildings here have attracted all of us, and we are having a good time here, okay? There's not one way to do things. If you interviewed every winemaker and every business owner, you might find something different. But right now, we can have packaged food, and we can have food trucks. And we can do that all the time if we follow the proper rules and this, that, and the other thing. And if we can streamline that and make it easier, that's wonderful, okay? But the holy grail is a restaurant. No one's proposed a restaurant because it's illegal. It's not zonable in the industrial area. Okay, we all know about industrial eats. It's an industrial area. It's an epicenter, okay? The holy grail is the restaurant because a vast majority of all the wine visitors that come to Lompoc don't sleep here. They don't sleep here because there's nothing to eat. Now that's changing with Nika and Scratch. Those are about the only two restaurants, and I don't want to slam any other restaurants, where people going on an upscale wine vacation want to have an upscale dinner. There's a lot of other great restaurants in town. I go to tons of them. But when you're talking about the quintessential wine vacation, these guys want to go to Industrial Eats, SY Kitchen, these kind of restaurants. So the holy grail is restaurants, okay? What is that going to do to Lompoc? Think about if you took out restaurants from Santa Ynez. Thousands of people wouldn't live there. They live there for wine and food. They could live anywhere in the world. They live there because they're living in essentially a Napa Valley. We have a Napa Valley here without food, so no one lives here. You know, when you go to Napa or Sonoma or Santa Ynez Valley and you're from Phoenix, you're like, hey, honey, do you think we could live here? And a lot of people said yes to Napa and Sonoma and San Ynez Valley. Not that many people say yes to Lompoc. I live here, and I live in one of the nicest cities in the world down south, but I live here 90% of the time because it has great weather and it has my wine passion here. And I make a lot of food myself, but I also go to a lot of local restaurants. So you have people that live here and sleep here, which then drives every business. Hotels, hundreds of houses sold, hundreds of houses ripped down and rebuilt. I mean, this is the vision. This is what happens when wine comes in and changes your community. And it's food trucks and packaged food isn't going to do it.
Okay.
And so we
just wrap
can
it up real quick now.
All right, I'll wrap it up. But the zoning part, fast tracking the industrial wine zoning to get to the restaurant is allowed. If somebody wants to put $500,000 and dig a hole, connect to the sewer, this is what people will do with restaurants. And the last thing is, if you have a little example for a case study, Los Alamos, nice little town, empty for 100 years. Beautiful town, lots of things for people to come there, but no one went there, ever, until food came. And now it's exploding with people doubling the house values and hundreds of people wandering around having a good time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anyone, go ahead, come up for it.
I'm Rebecca Work, wine owner. We've been here almost 15 years. We've seen the progression of Lompoc. We also have seen that when we were probably one of the first areas of tasting rooms outside of Los Olivos, now we've seen all of the other cities have surpassed us. Look at the Funk Zone. Look at the Urban Trail in Santa Barbara. They didn't exist before we did. Unfortunately, we've been held back. And that's really a shame. I'm actually privy to a lot of new changes in Los Alamos because we're close to Los Alamos, and I know what they're doing there, and they're going to surpass Lompoc if we don't fix these problems that us as a wine industry has, because there's a lot of wineries coming in, we have a lot of competition, and nobody wants to go to a food truck and eat in a parking lot. I'm sorry, it just is not. We've got enough taco places, and I don't mean to knock the restaurants, but we're trying to upscale Lompoc. We're trying to get people from Orange County who has a lot of money who will stay here, but they need a place that does have dining room tables inside a building and not sitting on a parking lot. So we need to look and become like Santa Barbara has become, where they've allowed the Funk Zone to have all this mixed use ability, where the wineries and the restaurants all work together. And until we do, Los Alamos, I will guarantee you, is going to pass us pretty quickly if Lompoc doesn't do something about us stopping to look like industrial buildings.
Thank you. Next.
Steve Pepe again. While I'm in the wine business, our winery's over on Laurel, so I don't have any horse in this race. In terms of priorities, about 6 years ago, the city council decided that economic development would be its #1 priority. You then commissioned a study by CalEd. The result of that study was a recommendation to hire an economic development director, which is Mrs. Gallivan, and it also created a recommendation to create the Economic Development Committee, which you did, and we're now in our 4th year. And each year the City Council has gone through its priorities, and economic development has always been, if not the top, in the top 1 or 2. At no time that I can recall in the last 4 or 5 years has anybody put signs as their #1 priority for the City Council. So I would think, being consistent with what you've done, being consistent with creating the Economic Development Committee, with hiring an Economic Development Director, that I would think that the addressing the issues in the wine ghetto, which you've heard over and over again, which will have a direct and immediate economic development impact, far exceeds the signs. And I would urge you to be consistent with your prior decisions and the prior decisions of prior city councils on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Getting closed public comment, and we'll go back to Ms. Wise.
Okay, thank you. We actually did have a few slides, discussion slides, 6 slides to organize a conversation, but I think we've hit on most of those, so I don't know if you want to look at those and see if there's anything else that the council and commission wanted to go back to. If we could just bring up the slide, overview slide, we can kind of not sure what happened with the presentation, but it doesn't really matter. So the discussion items were just the approach and schedule, talking about that overall. The wine ghetto was the second discussion item. The Old Town specific plan was the third discussion item. Commercial zones and just kind of any other things that you wanted to touch on. So it seems like we hit upon these, so I don't know if we need to go through them one by one, so it's up to the mayor.
I don't think so, unless any council member or planning commissioner has any. I agree with you. I think we've touched on all those.
I think so too.
Councilmember Starbuck?
I just wanted to throw something out there. I'm sitting here with the industrial district guidance in front of me, and one of the things that comes out is it specifies all of the industrial zoning uses. One of them is the 15% for retail, et cetera, et cetera. I heard a term the gentleman here used, industrial wine zone. Primarily, all of Mr. Sabani's property is rented to wineries, I'm going to assume, out there, what I've seen of it. Could we have that as a specific industrial wine zone where we could write the wants of the wine industry into it? But on the other hand, we have a 40-acre park being developed out here that, do we want a 40-acre wine ghetto?
Yeah, so you could put an overlay over that area to allow different kind of uses that aren't allowed everywhere in the industrial zone, or you could create a new zone for the wine ghetto that would regulate just that area of the city. So I think those are sort of the two, ways that you could address it if you wanted to go the overlay or the new zoning route. So yes, you could do either one. Because you likely wouldn't want to allow restaurants or these kind of uses in all your industrial areas. I'm not sure, but it seems like you want to protect some of your industrial area for job growth, other kind of job growth.
Okay. Those items up there, council members, planning commissioners, any comments, questions? Okay.
Real quick, Bob, when are we going to discuss the Old Town specific plan?
When was that to be brought up?
Well, we can go through these items one by one if you want to, because that was part of the discussion, the Old Town specific plan, if we want to maintain it.
Let's discuss number 3, the Old Town specific plan.
Okay. So this is just an overview slide for the Old Town specific plan. I guess some of the questions are, do we maintain the plan or not? Do we put all the regulations in the citywide code? A lot of those are already in the code in terms of zoning. What do you want to see happen with the existing specific plan? Does it get updated to cover that area downtown? I think those are some policy decisions for the council. The general plan does say to update the specific plan, although it seems like we can accomplish a lot of the goals by updating the standards in the citywide code update.
Mr. Fink.
Okay, I have an observation concerning the Old Town Commercial District. We adopted that plan in 2001, and I can only think of one project that has occurred in the Old Town Commercial area, and that's the brewery that they're currently under construction. So I don't know how much value that a specific plan provided us. So, as long as, if we compare it to the existing standards and it turns out to be a ditto, then I don't know why we need a specific plan for the downtown if in 14 years nothing has happened.
Well, a specific plan can provide policy and direction for that area of your city. Another thing it does is actually identifies financing mechanisms to implement certain programs. Not sure exactly why the plan didn't, develop the vision at that point in time. We would need to go back through it sort of piece by piece. But a lot of jurisdictions use those plans as tools for specific areas of cities, especially downtowns. It's really a policy decision. I think with the updated general plan, you probably have a lot of your policy direction in your general plan already. So the citywide code update could fix, the downtown issues with zoning and uses and parking. So you might not need that interim plan anymore in a city of this size.
Ms. Wise, in your summary that you gave to us, several things stuck out to me, and I sort of highlighted them in the Old Town Commercial Zone. And that was some of the stakeholders requested additional flexibility regarding the uses there. I think that would be very beneficial. And then someone else commented on developmental incentives. I think if we look forward to some things like that, we probably get more development in using the Old Town specific plan. So just my observation.
Yeah, I think providing as much flexibility as possible in that area to really spark, development. Being too strict is not what we need to do. We need to sort of see incremental changes, think come in over time, be as flexible as we can while still achieving the vision. Is I think a good start for down there. Yeah. Our next step.
Mr. Weimiller.
Right. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to comment that in my relatively brief compared to the rest of your experience here in Lompoc, that when I've come into contact, so to speak, with the Old Town specific plan, I find there are some features that are attractive that might be good to go ahead and have citywide. There are some things, again, related to parking, where ultimately, plan or not plan, you probably have to have some special rules downtown exempting the parking requirements you might have in other places. But I've been more intrigued by the limitations it seems to place on things. To give an example, there's an we've had a few conversations about this, but there's an expressed prohibition against pawnbrokers. And that might have been because at one point there was a perception of the industry that was fairly negative, that perhaps all the dealings that go on with a pawnbroker is seedy in nature or something. But I can tell you in a great number of cities you could point to a pawnbroker shop that's pretty high-end and upscale, where the front end, the retail end, looks every bit like some of the classiest jewelry stores you'd go in, and the back end, the lending end, looks like any other bank you'd go into. I think it's important that however you proceed with this Old Town specific plan, that if you choose to retain it, at a minimum needs to be amended so that we speak in terms of standard, in other words, what we're looking for in terms of quality, and not necessarily specific exclusions, because I'm less concerned about, for instance, whether there's a pawn shop there or not. I'm more concerned that it reflects what we want to see in the community for that and any other storefront that's around. So I'd be thinking quality rather than exclusions on that plan.
Thank you. Councilmember Vega.
Yes, I agree with City Manager Weimiller, because one of my businesses is right there, and some of the hardships I've seen landlords have to overcome has just been unreal. In most cases, if the city or the people didn't already own the building outright, or it was because it's Old Town and because it was older people and pioneer people that have owned those buildings, they would have lost those buildings had they had a mortgage payment because of the Old Town restrictions on any office buildings on the bottom, where they wanted to have boutiques. And as Mr. Weimiller says, you can't have a pawn shop. We want everything downstairs to be approved by planning. I think that's those restrictions. I think the plan once upon a time was to try and develop the economic downturn in finance and housing. It just put an undue hardship on the landlords. So
the reason why the Old Town plan hasn't worked, to me, is very easy. very simple. The landlords or the developers don't see the economic returns in developing those properties. And they don't see the economic return in developing those properties because no one walks there. There's no walking. There's no market. There's no people to sell to. There's no people to cater to. So I agree with Mr. Miller and Councilman Vega that the issue is how can we get businesses and storefronts that attract people to walk and to live that particular area. Because if an area is not lived, no one is going to see the benefits in developing it. So yes, definitely less restrictions, more incentives to business that attract to create a walkable area.
Mr. Choney, that also, I agree with you, and that would also help develop the mixed-use zones. People may want to live in an upstairs apartment in the downtown area, so. Okay, Mr. Starbuck.
Yeah, I just want to say I am a landlord downtown, and getting 35 cents a square foot for me is a big hurrah, yay. The other thing I want to say is the downtown specific plan. I'm going to use one example. The specific plan is we want push carts. We'd love to have push carts in town. The zoning ordinance is so restrictive. If you have a push cart, you have to move it. It has to be so many inches from the curb. It's so detailed that you have to have above average intelligence to push a cart. Then we have a traffic ordinance that says arrest him. If he's a push cart guy, arrest him and get him off the streets. So there's many disclaimers in here that go against each other. So when we look at these plans and ordinances, we need to coordinate all of them.
Councilman Vega.
By the way, Dirk, who wants push carts? You want push carts? Is that what you said?
I just want to know if you can have them or not, and where and when.
Okay, anyone else at this table? Okay, so she has gone over, Ms. Wise has gone over the approach, the schedule. Schedule acceptable with everyone at this point?
One open issue.
One open issue.
Yeah, we have one open issue, and that's what do you want to prioritize? Do you want to prioritize a wine ghetto or signs, or do you want to, or does the team have an alternative approach that we might work things in parallel?
Thank you, and that's what I'm going to be getting to. I just want to go down the list here real quick. I think, other than that, we've sort of exhausted the wine ghetto discussion. The Old Town specific plan we just went over. Everyone okay with that discussion? Commercial zones. Okay, signs, parking, we've approached those. So, do we have some options on where we could go with the prioritizing signs and or the wine ghetto, food, restaurants, go-karts, whatever, not go-karts, food trucks, what options do we have?
Well, I mean, it's really up to the city and where the city wants to go and how fast you want to go on some of these issues. I mean, I think if we think about the wine ghetto, some of the pros of moving it forward are economic development. We keep hearing this imperative, what's the competition doing? What does it mean for the city? And taking advantage of that and also making it an early win for the process. I mean, I think that's important too. So we gain momentum and address a hot topic item. I mean, I think, so those are the upside of doing that. In terms of the things the council commission needs to think about is, does that slow down the process overall? And we would kind of need to go back and look at our schedule and think about that. It might slow down the overall process a little bit. And then, if you do address things one at a time, you can take things out of context and run into those consistency issues that Councilmember Starbuck was just talking about. We're doing the whole code update, so I don't see that as a gigantic issue, but that does happen when you start to take things one at a time instead of a comprehensive update. So I think those are just some of the things the council and commission need to balance. In addition, we have to look at the general plan consistency. I'm not sure if it would require a general plan amendment. I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but that's just something that we need to look at. And then I'm not sure about the infrastructure question, but we would have to kind of think about that as we move the ordinance forward. And that would be part of probably the environmental review if that was an issue, and maybe it's not an issue, I'm not certain, it wasn't clear tonight, but that would be part of the environmental review. You know, in terms of the range of ideas, it doesn't sound like the small-scale temporary use permit is really what the industry is looking for, so I don't know if we could come to agreement there or not. In terms of a short-term strategy, you know, kind of looking at the one end of the scale, temporary use permit, food trucks, some sort of smaller scale stuff. I know food trucks aren't where people want to go, but that actually is something a lot of places have done as smaller incremental steps. I mean, downtown Austin is a model, Seattle, Portland. People have really made these like fabulous, and chefs use them as sort of pop-up shops. I'm not trying to sell that here. I'm just kind of explaining where they've been really successful and really, really nice.
Could you explain a pop-up shop? What is that?
Well, those are sort of just a smaller scale, less expensive, not quite the brick and mortar kind of incremental steps that some jurisdictions do before you really have bigger infrastructure improvements. So it doesn't sound like that's what the industry is looking for, but you know, it's things other cities have done quite successfully, and they look really good. If we wanted to go all the way towards an overlay in the area or creating a new sort of wine industrial zone, it's really not that complicated. It's just creating a zone, what the standards are, what the uses are, and what the permits are for those uses. You know, it will be a standalone zone until we get the whole code updated. But again, I mean, in some ways, that's a little bit simpler process than a signed ordinance, which has a lot of moving parts, different signs in different zones, a lot of graphics, a lot of legal issues, kind of things to work through. I think creating the wine ghetto zone would be a little bit simpler process than the citywide sign ordinance update, which affects everybody and gets complicated, and you do run into a lot of legal things we'd have to talk about. There was just a recent Supreme Court case even kind of brings it into question that actually the implementation of that's not completely resolved. We'd have to figure out with your city attorney.
Ms. Wise, can you give us a ballpark figure of how long it would take to do the wine ghetto in weeks or months? I realize that the process has to be an orderly process, and if CEQA rears its ugly head, it could take considerably longer, but what's just a swag?
A rough guess, depending on CEQA, because I don't know how much environmental analysis we need. If it's just a neg deck, that goes pretty fast, but if somehow we got into a more extensive CEQA review, that would be a different process. But a rough guess, I would say, if we're going to have a workshop and then hearings, probably 6 months. Maybe it could go up to 8 months, but only because I think we'd have to have a workshop, meet with the Planning Commission, and then go to council. I mean, all that's 3 months right there, right? One workshop, Planning Commission, council. Plus, it would take us a month to draft it, a month to review it, public review draft. I think a minimum of 6 months with hearings and workshop and minimum CEQA.
Okay, so if you're looking for instant gratification, that ain't going to happen with this process. That's just the way it works, okay?
Councilmember Vega.
Ms. Wise, if we were to try and kill two birds with one stone, so to speak, okay, would it be permitting? Would it be commercial zone? Would we work on the wine ghetto overlay, so to speak, and then the sign ordinance and throw that in? You mentioned sometimes you could do maybe both at the same time. Does it have to be in singular form, where it has to be the sign ordinance without working on that second zone? I mean, it sounded like it was pretty intensive just for signs. Is that correct?
Can you restate your question?
Okay.
I mean, we can work on multiple fronts at one time.
So basically, if we were to deal with the popular vote here of wine ghetto and developing either a zone, or it may be even better just to create an overlay, and how do we integrate working on the sign ordinance as a priority number 2, if that was where the council wanted to go? Okay, how would you guys be able to, can you work on both of them at the same time or not?
Yeah, we probably could. We probably jumpstart the wine ordinance first to get that going. It seems like a little bit, we've heard more about that than the sign ordinance, and then we could shortly after that start the sign ordinance, if that's what the council and commission wanted to do.
As long as we're not leaving something out that needs to go along with that ordinance change, I mean, you would have to give us a little guidance on what else we would have to add in there in order to make that happen, okay? Just asking a question.
Okay, so Ms. Wise, I think that is an answer that would probably satisfy this group up here, but I need to ask, I don't know how large your staff is, but I know how large our staff is. I need to ask our staff. what is your ideas on this?
Well, as we all know, we have very limited planning staff, though we're hoping to increase that. Really, I think we would really need to look at the schedule. Doing 2 items and taking one out of sequence that way, it would be a very challenging time for the planning staff, as well as having all of the other development projects that we have. We have several large development projects going forward at this time. So certainly whatever the council and the planning commission, if you could select one as opposed to multiple fronts, that would be much preferable for our workload.
Mr. Weinmiller?
And Mr. Baird, Ms. Breeze just touched on exactly what I was going to say. I would still, what you're going to hear from me is for me to press you and have you instruct us as to what you think is the higher priority of the 2. And if we can multitask, we will, but we will ultimately, while we're off on our own, invariably have to make some decisions in time allocations just because of the extreme limitations of the depth of staff right now and available. We only have so many hours in the day, and there are daily operational imperatives going on while trying to deliver these plans. So, there's still the expectation as, for instance, the Solvang Brewery comes in, that we're giving them, priority turnaround on anything they need to submit for review, which pulls us away. I mean, it's the same people doing this work that's doing the daily operational reviews. So we really need a priority designated.
Okay, and I'm glad and I appreciate your trying to accommodate us, but I have to think of our staff as well. Councilmember Mosby, or whom? Oh, Clark. Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm thinking that these 2 things, the signs and the wine industrial zone, are not 2 equal-sized projects, but we seem to be swapping one for the other and acting as though it's going to have the same impact on you. So I'm not sure what the significance is of, well, I understand the significance. Could you do the wine ghetto thing, and then the next thing that you do is the signs? I mean, I don't know how you do those things internally, but somebody had previously mentioned having.
I think there are times we can multitask and be handling more than one thing at a time, sometimes 2 or 3. There are necessarily, it just happens, there are days where we are pinched off and not going to be able to spend any time on this, and there's times where we might be able to get to an item, and that's why I was pressing for the prioritization. If we find ourselves on those days where it's not smooth sailing, we've got plans being submitted from multiple projects that we want to see get delivered, and at the same time, we're trying to build, program level issues here. We just need to understand which one would get our first. It doesn't mean we're doing everything in sequential order, that we're going to do this, then that, then that. It's just that on those days that we don't have 3 lanes of traffic open, we only have 1. We need to know what gets the priority.
And maybe Ms. Breeze or Mr. Weinmiller, in that with, again, time and staff, temporary staff, is that an option that we have for this?
Yeah, we've tried as much as possible at times to bring on temporary staff. Ultimately, our solutions require more permanent succession. The most, correct me if you have a different view, but from my standpoint, there's quite a bit of difference in productivity and of our daily operational imperatives and our ability to properly evaluate and implement programs like this between having permanent staff with some experience behind them and temporary staff with that might have experience in industry, but kind of shallow in our particular processes and knowledge of the local area.
Okay. Councilmember Vega, and then, yes, Councilmember Vega.
Ms. Wise, kind of the priorities, I would say, from where we're coming from, economic development-wise, if it's the council's wish as a whole here, I think the wine ghetto should take precedence, and then the sign ordinance should come after that if we can't multitask and get it both. They're all important, and they're all going to get done. It's just which one's going to provide more of an impact to Lompoc. And it's just like anything else. When people see something happening here, it's going to spur other people development-wise. Commercial properties are moving really slow here in this town. All it takes is a little bit of movement. I'm sure Solvang Brewery is going to provide some sort of a economic boost to Lompoc. Okay, the word gets out, and that's what we need, a few more of those little things to get out. And as Mr. Ostini can tell you, with the chamber, he knows that just a little positive word out there goes a long ways, to helping us bring new people here to spend different money. Otherwise, we're just recirculating the same amount of money, and who are we fooling there, okay? We're looking for third-party money. People like Mr. Steve out there that said, hey, we need other people from Orange County. Look at Los Alamos, Buellton. They're bringing in other new people. They're not just recirculating the same town's money, which is not going to help everybody, and then you're going to have nothing but statistics here also.
Councilmember Mosby.
This is a question for the consultants. You made a statement that by taking something out of order would potentially delay. Can you elaborate on that? What were you talking about, taking what out of order?
Well, if we move pieces of the comprehensive code update up ahead of the whole update, there's just, there may be additional meetings or workshops, or maybe additional CEQA review. I'm not sure what the overlay or the new wine industrial zone, if a general plan amendment would be needed. Those kind of things, we just need to look at it and see, how long that takes. We can also work on things at our office to keep them going so that as staff is ready, they're sort of teed up, so it's not that everything has to stop behind the scenes, but it's those kind of things we need to take into account that we didn't look at when we did our initial scope and timeline.
But wouldn't those things need to be addressed and looked at regardless of where the particular item is on the schedule?
Potentially, but we may be doing multiple CEQA reviews if we adopt ordinances earlier, and additional general plan amendments later. It's just sort of looking at things kind of one at a time instead of the comprehensive sort of soup to nuts. I'm not saying it'll take longer or more money. I think somebody did mention, doing the sign ordinance I think is more complex than doing the wine zone, whatever we want to call it, because the sign ordinance is a big project. So it's not exactly the same in terms of effort. But, it is sort of like you have like a A to Z sort of plan, and then you start moving things around. It just needs to be, maybe additional meetings and other things that we didn't think about initially.
Councilmember Mosby.
Question for Ms. Breeze. How many parcels are in the wine ghetto? Approximately.
Probably 8.
Okay, and how many parcels would be affected by the sign ordinance?
Probably a third of the city.
Right, a significant amount. And I think, we're talking about economic development. Remember, I know Councilmember Vega owns a couple businesses, and I'm quite confident if he didn't have a sign on, it would be difficult for him to conduct business. So, that understand, I am about economic development. I understand that, but understand too that if the businesses can't get their signs up, we've had significant businesses leave because of the conflicts in the sign ordinance. And we know who they were. There was a great big one that did leave not too long ago because of some of the issues. Their sign was this big, and this was their national logo, and they had to have it, and they didn't, and got in a match, and they left. But I know there have been significant impacts on other people. When we're talking about a degree in the ghetto, it's probably 7 years ago that happened in there. But I agree the ghetto is important, but remember, it is a smaller part of it, and it may be able, that can be done faster. But to kick something down that's been, I don't know how many years we've been talking about updating sign. Councilmember Starbucks. I mean, it's been a long, multiple years. It's something that's been going down. And talking about, I know Councilmember Holmdahl always bring up the issue about kicking the can down the road, and not that it's not going to get done, not that the ghetto's not going to get done, but remember, my viewpoint is that we think of the whole of the community. Granted, the sign ordinance is also going to affect the wine ghetto area. It's another aspect of it. So piecemealing, like you made some comments that we're doing this. Granted, we could get this project going through, but are we going to delay it potentially? And I think the bottleneck is not necessarily on your aspect, on your side, but the city. We have several huge projects coming down for staff. And if we get on there, we could significantly delay by moving it around months, maybe more than months. So I just thinking you're processing what you're feeling it's going to be, and I hear the handful of the public. Every one of those people has a winery, and I understand. And I think if other people understood what was going on with the sign aspects, when you think about the multitudes over the years that have come in front of Planning Commission and such over sign issues, there are a lot of people that didn't make it here, who did breeze through, and some of them I think are still kind of in the loops. We really haven't put our fingers in them on the sign ordinances yet. So I'm just thinking, we hear comments that the sign ordinance, we're worried about economic development. We are all worried about it. And again, it's important all the way around.
Councilor Starbuck.
Yeah, I just kind of want to digress back. We put signs as a priority as a council. Now we're going to try and flip it and say, oh no, signs are not the thing. I got to tell you, signs is always an issue here. Every business that comes in faces up to a 3-month delay just on the sign because every sign has to go to Planning Commission for specific approval. You want to talk about economic development, tell the guy he can't open because he has to wait for a Planning Commission hearing. I hate to say with the wine ghetto, we're playing catch up again with you guys. We had the city at that point was industrial. You went through a lot of work to get to where you could serve wine in an industrial park. It's created a life of its own. So here we're playing catch up again because now we don't know about CEQA, about our general plan update. I think it's a great idea to have a new zone, and at that point, once it's approved, it'll give you so much leniency in the wine ghetto that you would be able to do everything that you want. Unfortunately, I think it's going to take that 6, 8, 9 months to happen. But I'd really hate to get off track with the plan that the consultants laid out, that the council had asked for before by putting signs to the wayside. It's been so long and so many hours of staff spent on it, Planning Commission, that let's just get that one done. Let's get you guys hooked up with the ordinance specifically for your industrial zone down there, and then we move on with the rest of it.
Councilmember Vega.
I disagree with on the economic development side. You guys are wanting to change the priorities around, but it's all going to happen anyway, so it's not a big deal. Okay, economic development-wise, I think the business owners deserve a chance to redeem themselves and make some money over here and make Lompoc a destination. We're missing the point that Lompoc still needs to be a destination. The sign ordinance isn't getting kicked out, it's just being moved down one notch. So I have to disagree with you guys on the business side of this. I think that putting economic development as a priority and making something happen, putting the sign ordinance, and they can work on it as they get time, it's going to be the next thing of the deal. It's not a big deal. It's going to happen.
Okay, we're going to do one final round. Obviously, I know your opinion on this, but any further comments or discussion you want on anything?
No, I just want to stick with the plan.
Okay. Councilmember Humdahl, any comments? Use the microphone and tell me where you stand on either the prioritizing the wine ghetto or the signs.
It's been very interesting. I've been listening to everybody say, but I think trying to get the wine ghetto taken care of, if it's going to take 6 months, if we can get it done on a fast track. And the idea that, I know that you've got a lot of major projects coming down there, so to have more than one thing going on there, it's going to be real tough. But if we can get that down, get that over with, because we've been discussing it for so long, it's about time we finally make a final decision on it. If we can get it done, and if we can get it in here and out of here in 6 months, we've done something we haven't done in 10 years.
Let's see. Commissioner Clark, do you have any comments? Final comments? Okay. Councilmember Mosby, we know where you are. You're on signs. Commissioner Fink, do you have any comments?
We've been talking about past decisions have been biting us in the posterior, and one decision made by the council several years ago, several budgets ago, was to reduce the planning staff significantly, and now you know what the impact of that is. So the impact of your decision tonight will be very important to how we proceed with this matter.
Okay, Commissioner Cioni, you have any final comments? Okay, and Commissioner, or Councilman Vega, do you have any, I obviously know where you stand on the, yes. Okay. Okay, final steps. Is this where we are at final steps right now? You want to go over final steps and we'll give you our decision as to where we go.
Final steps are really up to the council and commission this evening. So the major milestone for us next was going to be the diagnostic report, was just the analysis of the existing zoning code and conflicting regulations. But how we prioritize our workload, I think, is really kind of where we are in terms of next steps. We can move forward with the diagnostics and the recommendations kind of in the background, but what we bring next to you folks is really kind of what we need to think about.
Okay. What? Oh, Councilmember Clark. Just Commissioner Clark.
I'm thinking that it isn't, these things are going to happen sequentially internally, but if I understand correctly, the sign ordinance was pulled out and it is being treated as an individual item. The other things you're going to do, but then you're going to have meetings that are going to cover all of those at the same time, or you're going to have reviews that are, the others go into one pile of stuff. So it is critical that if you do the wine ghetto thing in lieu of the signs, then the signs aren't going to happen until the end, when everything is that correct?
Well, I mean, if we pull the sign ordinance up front, we'll start on that front. We can start, I mean, the wine ghetto, if we pull that up and start that up front, we'll move that for the process. We in the background can also start the sign ordinance and then wait for staffing and, that process to catch up. That doesn't have to stop completely and, run completely sequentially, like we finish the ordinance and then our office doesn't start anything on the signs until that's done. So we can work in the background on both. But it is going to be sort of the public process, the hearings. We don't want to be, confusing too many things going on at one time. Staff does have a full plate. There's a lot of, moving parts at the city, of course. So we would just have to work that in. And then look at the overall schedule for the code, if we could still keep within a 2-year, plus or minus time frame. Does that answer your question? Okay.
That sounds like you'll need to if a change is decided to be made, that you're going to have to look at your master plan again and see.
Yeah, we would. We'd go back through the schedule and look at how far out some of those workshops would move, and then the topic for those workshops and whatnot. Yes, we'd look at that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, if we leave the schedule the way it is right now, we'll keep. I mean, if we do this, we'll keep signs as a priority. But you, with your team, will be working in the background still on the wine ghetto, the overlay, whatever we're going to do, because we're having a discussion here whether we have 6-inch pipes, 8-inch pipes. Mr. Sabani built it. He says there's 8-inch pipes. I have no reason to argue with him. He built the thing. So, I mean, but we need to make sure we know that so we can have some food industry down there. The signs are important. So since I'm sort of in the middle here and I am going to stick with the same schedule we have right now, keeping signs as our priority. But please, you've heard the comments from the public. I believe that both these are real severe economic issues. Signs and the wine ghetto is probably, I agree with everyone out there that, if they're drawing people from all over Southern California, Northern California into our area. I'm still not, I wasn't clear whether we're going to have white linen tablecloths on our restaurants down there. Mr. Sabani doesn't seem to think that's it. Prepackaged food, this gentleman over there, and I think you'd like to have a finer restaurant in there. So I think that has to be discussed. So please continue to work on that so it's clarified to us what we're going to be doing. But I think this council is directing you to stick with the schedule you have prepared and work in that direction.
Bob, I have a comment to make.
Yeah, we're going to go with final comments in real quick. So Councilmember Vega.
Bob, we're making decisions on economic development. It's not always what staff wants and staff needs, okay? I just tend to remind everybody why we're here, what we're doing, who elected us, and what we're trying to do and spur the economy, because what I see is we're speaking with forked tongue here, okay? We're going with sign ordinance when we have business owners. If you had a business out there, you would have a real feeling for what's going on out there, okay? I just want to make that comment, okay? People are making decisions based on enforcement, code enforcement. We're backing up code enforcement to the hilt, which is important, but we're not spurring the economy here, okay, with some of our decisions. So I want to make that comment, okay?
I hear that. So, okay, any other further comments from the council or commission?
Just one final comment. Don't expect the zoning ordinance to be an eraser of past mistakes. What's here is here. The zoning ordinance impacts what's going to happen in the future, okay? And as Ms. Wise has pointed out, this is not going to be an overnight process. This is going to take a couple of years to accomplish. To the wine industry, I would suggest to you that if you have a proposal, bring it forward to Ms. Breeze as a request, and we may take a look at it. I mean, there's other ways to address your concerns, and they would later be folded into the zoning ordinance if it worked. I mean, this is an opportunity to test something out. So don't go away mad. Go away with your scratch pads and sit down together and come back to it with us with a proposal.
Councilor Starbuck.
I guess one of the basic questions here, did we all agree that we want to go ahead and establish an industrial wine zone?
I think that is one of the things that you're going to be working on. Is that correct? So, yeah. Okay. Any other discussions at this table? Ms. Wise, from your group, any other concerns, questions, comments?
No, I think we're good.
Staff?
Thank you all.
Okay, final public comment. I guess we upset everyone, so.
I've been sitting here, Tony Ostini, and I have to agree, a couple of comments have been made about economic development here. We are being surpassed by, you look at Old Town Orchid, you look at Los Alamos, you look at Buellton, you look at everything around here, and we are actually failing. So I just really hope that you do take into consideration what all the businessmen are saying, because I think Fetty brought it up too, the walking. I think there's a lot to be said about pedestrianizing, especially the old town, circulation of traffic, et cetera, as well, to be considered maybe down low at the bottom of your list. I don't know where that falls into the city plan, but that's also a huge part of economic development and when you want to walk and create a pedestrian zone. Thank you.
Thank you.
George Bedford, community organizer, owner of Sunset Auto Center. I've been in business in Lompoc since 1971. I think you guys are taking a step backwards. Perception is everything. And right now, everybody in town virtually thinks we're doing jack, okay? Now we're going to sit around and study a sign ordinance as a priority for this community. I'm looking at an impact for the general public. It's not going to affect my business at all, okay? I'm in a car business. But it is going to affect a lot of small businesses in town. And I just think your priorities are screwed up. That's my opinion. That's about all I have to say. This meeting's been a waste. You need to give these folks direction. That's what they're asking for. And if that's the direction you're giving them, then you're wasting a lot of time to try to make perception of what's going on in this community a reality. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Nick, you stood up? No? Okay. No one else? Then this meeting is adjourned. We are going to be adjourned to, let's see, what are we adjourning to? We are adjourning to, where's my final, okay. Okay, we are adjourning to the Planning Commission meeting on, no, the Planning Commission is here, so we are going to have, the Planning Commission will adjourn to their next meeting on November 4th at 6:30, and the City Council is adjourning to the regularly scheduled meeting of November 3rd at 6:30 here in the council chambers. We're adjourned.